There's a specific kind of regret that only exists if you buy a truck brand new instead of waiting a year or two, and it's worth naming before we count down a single entry. A used truck comes with a paper trail. Somebody else already found the early software bugs, somebody else already triggered the first recall, and by the time you're shopping, the internet has usually told you exactly which model year to avoid and which one quietly got the good parts. A brand new truck comes with none of that built-in protection. You are the paper trail. Every one of the 12 trucks on this list was bought new by somebody who had no way of knowing what the rest of us know now, and that's the specific kind of regret this video is actually about. The regret of being first in line for a problem nobody had documented yet. Here's the pattern sitting underneath all 12 of them, and once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. For most of the last 70 years, a pickup truck earned its reputation the boring way. A big, low-stressed engine, a simple transmission, and not much wiring connecting the two. It made its power by being large, not by being clever, and because nothing was working especially hard, nothing tended to break in a hurry. A mechanic from that era could look under almost any hood on the market and know exactly what he was looking at within about 30 seconds. Somewhere in the last 15 years, that changed for good. Fuel economy rules tightened. Marketing departments got a seat at the engineering table, and the industry discovered you could take a smaller engine, force air into it under pressure, wrap the whole truck in cameras and touchscreens, and sell the result as progress. Some of it genuinely is progress. All of it is also one more thing that can fail, one more part you can't fix yourself in a driveway, and one more line item quietly serving somebody's balance sheet instead of the truck's actual lifespan. This year adds a specific wrinkle worth knowing before we start counting, because it explains why a couple of these entries might surprise you. Two of the biggest names in vehicle reliability, J.D. Power and Consumer Reports, evaluated several of the same nameplates in 2026 and came back with results that don't always agree with each other. One of them tends to measure a truck 3 years after purchase, once the early bugs have had time to surface or get fixed by a running change. The other leans much harder on brand new model years and fresh owner complaints, catching problems while they're still raw. When you see a truck praised in one breath and dragged in the next, that's usually why. Keep that tension in mind because it explains more of this list than any single bolt or bearing does on its own. I also want to be upfront about how this list came together. Every fact and figure here is current as of this summer, not a recycled headline from a year or two ago, and a couple of these trucks have genuinely gotten worse since the last time anybody covered them, while at least one of them has quietly gotten better in ways most coverage still hasn't caught up to. Let's count them down. Worst still to come. 12 Toyota Tundra. Toyota built its entire reputation on engines that simply run for decades without complaint, the kind of reputation most manufacturers spend billions in advertising trying to buy and never quite manage. And the redesigned Tundra spent its first several years actively testing that reputation to the breaking point. The twin-turbo 3.4-liter V6 under the hood has been dogged by main-bearing failures, oil pressure collapsing toward zero, and the engine seizing. In some documented cases at highway speed, traced back to manufacturing debris left inside the block during assembly. The kind of contamination a careful inspection process should have caught long before the truck ever reached a customer's driveway. Toyota has now been through this exact recall more than once, and troublingly, some replacement engines installed under warranty have gone on to fail the identical way, which suggests the fix and the original flaw might simply be the same defect wearing a new serial number, cold comfort for an owner who thought a fresh engine meant a fresh start. Stack a separate recall for backup cameras going blank at the worst possible moment, plus another for tonneau covers that can physically detach from the bed at speed. And you get a truck wearing a badge that earned its trust with a completely different, much simpler engine than the one currently sitting under the hood of a new one. Decades of goodwill riding on hardware built by an entirely different set of hands. 11. Ford F-150 Lightning. This one stings specifically because the people who actually own one mostly love driving it, quiet, quick around town, and genuinely useful for daily errands in a way plenty of gas trucks in this segment simply aren't. Then Ford pulled the plug on the Lightning late last year after billions of dollars in losses across its electric vehicle division and pivoted hard back toward hybrids instead. So today you'd be buying a truck the company that built it has already mentally walked away from, which is an unsettling position to be in while you're still several years into a car payment on it. There was an early battery recall tied to a cell defect that could short and start a fire, with affected owners told to stop charging past 80% until a permanent fix arrived. A workaround that quietly limited exactly the range buyers had paid extra for in the first place. Actually hooking up a trailer and towing anything meaningful collapses the truck's range hard, a rough discovery for a vehicle whose entire job description supposedly includes towing. And the depreciation has been genuinely brutal, with early buyers watching a large share of the sticker price evaporate within just a couple of years, long before the truck itself had actually done anything wrong to earn it, purely because the company that built it decided to move on to something else entirely. 10. Chevrolet Silverado, 1500 and GMC Sierra 1500. Same truck built on the same platform in the same plant, so they earn one slot together the same way GM's own engineers clearly treat them internally. The 6.2-liter V8 available across these trucks uses a cylinder deactivation system that relies on a set of small locking pins, and when those pins stick, the result is violent misfires, bent push rods, and a chewed-up cylinder head. The kind of repair nobody wants to discover is theirs on a random Tuesday morning. The problem has been widespread enough that Chevrolet issued outright stop sale orders, meaning dealers were legally barred from selling trucks that were sitting right there on the lot, fully built and ready to drive off, engines included, until the issue got sorted out at the factory level. Choose the smaller turbocharged 4-cylinder specifically to dodge the V8's drama, and you run straight into leaking radiator hoses instead, which feels less like solving the problem and more like trading it for a smaller, damper version of the same headache. Layer in electrical gremlins, shorting low-voltage wiring harnesses and keyless entry systems that fail at seemingly random moments. And you understand why this platform keeps landing near the bottom of independent reliability surveys despite being one of the best-selling trucks in the entire country. Proof that sales volume and dependability are far less connected than the marketing suggests, no matter how many commercials say otherwise. 9. GMC Sierra, 2500 HD, and Chevrolet Silverado, 2500 HD. Heavy-duty trucks exist specifically to work hard without complaint, and this particular pairing has been struggling to show up for that exact job, which is about the worst thing you can say regarding a truck built for towing and hauling as its entire reason for existing in the first place. Diesel models paired with the Allison transmission have shown noticeable shift lag and harsh, jarring gear engagements, the kind of behavior you might forgive in a truck with 200,000 miles already on it, not one costing well into six figures fresh off the lot with the paper floor mats still in place. The exhaust after-treatment system carries its own separate headache, clogged particulate filters, and failed urea injectors that can drop the truck into a restrictive countdown limp mode, severely capping your speed on the way to the dealer, usually with a loaded trailer still hooked up behind you the whole way there. And the Silverado half of this pairing carries something genuinely alarming layered on top of all of that. A recall covering a trailer brake module that can overheat, melt, and in the worst documented cases catch fire outright on a truck engineered specifically to spend its entire working life towing heavy loads behind it, not fighting them at highway speed with a trailer full of cargo pushing back. 8. GMC Hummer EV. This one is almost a case study in how badly numbers can pile up once nobody stops to ask whether they should. The truck weighs somewhere around 9,000 pounds, closer to a small building than an actual vehicle, and it depreciates accordingly, like one of those buildings just got condemned by the city inspector overnight, red tag on the door and all. Real-world examples show trucks that originally stickered well into six figures changing hands for a fraction of that within a couple of years, sometimes with barely any miles logged on the odometer at all, which tells you the depreciation curve here has almost nothing to do with wear, and everything to do with simple math working against the buyer from day one. Owners have reported persistent software glitches, high-voltage electrical faults, and in some genuinely ugly cases, entire battery packs failing more than once within the first several thousand miles, leading straight to lemon law buybacks rather than repairs, the kind of outcome that should never happen twice on a truck this expensive. when a truck this expensive gets compared by its own owners to one of the worst financial decisions of their entire lives. That's the review that actually matters, far more than any horsepower figure printed on the original window sticker or any 0 to 60 number the brochure was so proud of at launch. 7. Tesla Cybertruck. Where do you even begin with this one? Outward visibility is genuinely compromised by the thick pillars and the sloped stainless steel body, which pushes drivers to lean hard on camera feeds that occasionally lag or drop out entirely at the exact moment you need them most, usually while backing towards something you'd very much like to keep unbroken and in one piece. Moving essential functions like the gear selector and the turn signals onto the touchscreen and steering wheel capacitive buttons means a locked-up computer system can leave you stuck with zero manual backup. A genuinely strange design decision for a truck marketed as ready for anything, apocalypse included. On the failure side, owners have reported sudden high-voltage shutdowns that fully immobilize the truck without warning, along with steering rack fasteners steering outright and brake lights failing after water finds its way somewhere it shouldn't. The kind of moisture intrusion a sealed, weatherproof vehicle isn't supposed to suffer from at all. Add rust spots appearing on a body that was marketed as effectively indestructible, and a resale value that's collapsed hard enough that some early buyers are watching a full third of their purchase price disappear inside the first year alone on a truck that was supposed to hold its value the same way its panels supposedly held their shape against the elements. 6. Chevrolet Colorado and GMC Canyon. Same platform, same assembly plant, same headaches, so these two share a single slot, twins in reliability, the same way they're twins on the assembly line day after day. The most alarming issue here is a genuine safety hazard, cold weather conditions that cause the electronic brake assist system to fail outright and force the truck into a hard limp mode capped around 43 miles an hour. Exactly the kind of malfunction you never want happening on an icy highway on ramp with traffic pressing in behind you. Mechanically, the 8-speed automatic carries a textbook torque converter shudder during low-speed deceleration, the kind of vibration you feel through your entire body in the driver's seat until you've almost stopped noticing it yourself, the way you eventually tune out a noisy refrigerator humming in the next room. And software updates meant to improve the infotainment system have instead been keeping control modules awake overnight, quietly draining the 12-volt battery and leaving more than a few owners stranded in their own driveway, jumper cables in hand before their morning coffees even finished brewing, wondering why a truck built for hauling gear can't manage to hold a charge until sunrise, let alone all winter long. 5. Rivian R1T. There's real respect owed to Rivian here. They actually built the thing and beat the legacy giants to market with something genuinely clever, which is more than most electric vehicle startups in this space have managed to pull off without a legacy manufacturer's checkbook and decades of supplier relationships behind them. But respect and reliability are two entirely different conversations, and this is exactly where the young company's relative inexperience shows up in an owner's driveway. Air suspension systems have been known to burn out their own compressors and drop the truck straight onto its bump stops, frequently requiring a flatbed tow to one of a still fairly small number of service centers, some of which are a genuine haul from wherever the truck happened to give out on the side of the road, adding hours to what should have been a routine repair. Owners have also reported drive unit failures and noticeable steering pull, and the 12-volt auxiliary battery, when it finally gives out entirely, can take the whole truck down with it, sometimes requiring a full wiring harness and battery replacement just to get the thing running again, an oddly large repair bill for what sounds like a small, forgettable component. The running costs aren't cheap either, and combined with steep early depreciation, you end up with a truck that costs a genuine fortune to own even during the months when absolutely nothing is wrong with it. A strange kind of expensive that most first-time buyers never think to budget for in advance. 4. Ford F-150. Yes, the best-selling vehicle in America, and no, this isn't a blanket warning to avoid it outright. It's a warning that the company building it just finished the single worst recall year any automaker has ever posted, by a distance that isn't remotely close to the previous record. Ford issued 153 separate recalls in 2025, nearly doubling the previous industry record of 77 set by General Motors back in 2014, and those recalls together touched almost 13 million vehicles, more than the next 9 automakers combined managed to rack up put together, a gap large enough that it isn't really a competition anymore. This year hasn't slowed down either, with tens of millions more vehicles already touched by recall notices by summer, including a single sweeping campaign covering more than 4 million trucks from the F-Series lineup, specifically a number large enough that it's genuinely difficult to find an F-150 buyer from the last 2 years who hasn't received at least one recall notice in the mail. And yet, despite all of that, Consumer Reports actually just named the F-150 a top pick for the first time since 2019, citing genuinely improved reliability, strong powertrain options, and a simple, usable cabin layout that owners actually enjoy living with day to day. Both of those facts are true about the exact same truck in the exact same year, and figuring out which version of that story describes the specific truck sitting on your local dealer's lot is basically impossible until you're already the owner signing the paperwork, which is about the least comforting sentence a shopper can hear before writing a check. 3. Ford Super Duty with the Power Stroke diesel. This is the one that can turn an ordinary Tuesday drive into a 5-figure catastrophe, and it comes down to one small, unglamorous part most owners never think about until it's already far too late to matter, buried deep in the fuel system where nobody ever looks until something breaks. The high-pressure fuel pump used on these diesels was engineered around cleaner, more lubricating fuel than what typically comes out of a pump in the United States. And starved of that lubrication, it can wear against itself until it fails outright. When it fails, it doesn't fail quietly, it grinds itself into fine metal shavings and pushes them straight through the rest of the fuel system, contaminating injectors and fuel lines along the way like sand poured directly into a running engine, doing damage well beyond the original pump itself. At that point, you're not simply replacing a pump, you're rebuilding an entire fuel system from front to back, a repair that regularly runs into the 5 figures and can sideline a work truck for weeks at a time right when you need it most. You buy an $80,000 or $90,000 work truck specifically to avoid this kind of surprise, and there's a landmine sitting quietly in the fuel system waiting for nothing more dramatic than the wrong tank of gas on the wrong afternoon on a truck bought precisely because it was supposed to be the one you never had to think twice about. 2. The GM 6.2-liter Fay 8, known as the L87. This is the story that's still actively unfolding, and it's gotten measurably worse, not better, since it first made headlines a couple of years back. General Motors recalled close to 600,000 trucks and SUVs carrying this engine over a manufacturing defect in the connecting rods and crankshaft bearings that can cause sudden, total engine seizure, sometimes with only a few thousand miles logged on the odometer, no warning knock beforehand, no check engine light, just silence where a running engine used to be moments earlier. The kind of failure that gives a driver almost no chance to react. The remedy offered for engines that passed inspection was, and I promise I'm not simplifying this for dramatic effect, thicker oil, a new filter, and a new oil cap, applied to an engine with a documented manufacturing defect baked into its actual metal. Owners are still reporting engines seizing after receiving that exact fix, in some cases barely over 1,000 miles past the repair, which is simply not the kind of number that should exist if the fix genuinely worked as advertised. Multiple lawsuits have since been consolidated into a single federal case representing owners nationwide, running close to 400 pages by the time it landed in court. And this past January, regulators opened an entirely new inquiry specifically to determine whether trucks that already went through the recall are failing all over again, a question that shouldn't need asking twice about the exact same repair. General Motors is currently asking a court to dismiss the case entirely, arguing the recall already solved the problem. The federal safety regulator investigating it doesn't sound nearly as convinced, and until that disagreement gets settled somewhere other than a press release, anyone driving one of these trucks is stuck living inside that exact gap, checking their oil a little more often than they probably used to before any of this made the news. 1. Ram 1500. And here's the twist that should genuinely surprise you. Just months after one major survey named the Ram 1500 the most dependable large pickup truck in America, climbing all the way from 4th place to 1st, a completely different, equally respected survey handed it the single worst reliability score any pickup truck has ever received in that publication's history. An almost apocalyptic result for a truck wearing a crown from the other end of the industry entirely. The trouble starts with something almost embarrassingly small, a keyless entry system with a parasitic drain that quietly kills the battery overnight, cascading into electrical faults across the entire truck by the following morning. A dead truck before the coffee's even finished brewing in the kitchen. Under the hood, the new Hurricane Twin Turbo Inline 6 has been linked to melted catalytic converters and coolant working its way into the intake, either of which can end in complete engine failure without much warning beforehand, a serious problem for an engine barely a couple of years into production. Even buyers who specifically chose the returning Hemi V8 to sidestep the new engine's growing pains have reported broken exhaust manifold bolts in the same lifter tick that's followed that engine for years. Proof that switching engines inside the same truck doesn't always switch you out of the truck's underlying problems entirely, no matter how much nostalgia rides along with the swap. Stack a recall for trailer brake modules that can catch fire, and another for dashboard screens that go dark without warning on top of all of that. And you land on a score low enough that it means nearly every single owner surveyed reported multiple, serious problems with a truck that, on paper, 3 years down the road, is supposed to be the single most dependable one on the entire lot, crown and all. Somewhere between those two surveys sits an actual truck in an actual driveway, and depending on exactly when it rolled off the line, it could genuinely be either one. Which is an unsettling thing to admit about a nameplate you're supposedly signing up for 7 years of payments toward. Now I have to be fair because that's the deal on this channel, and the contradiction sitting at the top of this list deserves a real explanation rather than just a dramatic one. J.D. Power's dependability study looks specifically at 3-year-old trucks from an earlier model year, meaning it's measuring an older Ram 1500 built before this generation's newest electronics and engine lineup arrived on dealer lots. A truck that had already worked most of its early bugs out by the time owners were actually surveyed about it years into ownership. Consumer Reports leans much more heavily on the newest model years and the freshest owner complaints, catching problems while they're still raw and largely unresolved. Those two studies aren't actually disagreeing about the same truck at all. They're each accurately describing a different chapter of the exact same nameplate's life, one from 3 years ago and one from right now. And the uncomfortable truth is that both chapters can be entirely true at once, which is exactly the kind of nuance a video title can never fit, no matter how many words you cram into it. It's also worth saying plainly that recalls themselves don't automatically mean a truck is unsafe to drive today. A recall is often the system working precisely as designed, a problem getting identified, and a fix getting issued before it turns into something genuinely worse, rather than a manufacturer sitting quietly on a known defect and hoping nobody notices. Ford's historically bad recall year, as embarrassing as the headline number sounds, partly reflects the company deliberately casting a wider net and moving faster on smaller issues than it used to, which is a genuinely different failure mode than an engine quietly seizing without any warning at all. Ford itself has pointed to an expanded safety team and more aggressive internal testing as the reason the numbers look the way they do. And there's at least some independent data backing that up in the form of improving warranty costs, even as the recall counts climbed higher than ever, which is exactly the pattern you'd expect from a company looking harder rather than building worse trucks. And several of the trucks lower on this list, the Rivian especially, remain genuinely beloved by the people who actually drive them every day, proof that owner satisfaction and measured dependability are tracking two completely different things. A truck can leave you stranded on a Tuesday and still be the vehicle you'd recommend to your own brother on a Wednesday, and both of those reactions can be perfectly sincere at the same time. If there's one honest takeaway sitting underneath all 12 of these, it's that a single number, whether it's a J.D. Power score, a Consumer Reports rating, or the countdown position I gave a truck tonight, is a starting point for your own research, never the whole answer sitting by itself. Buying new means you're the one generating the data everybody else gets to read later, and the specific model year, the specific engine code, and the specific complaint thread matter more than the badge on the tailgate ever will, however proud that badge makes you feel in the driveway. That one question, ask before you sign anything will tell you more than any list, mine included, ever could. Picture the two ends of this list side by side for a second because they genuinely do rhyme with each other in ways that are easy to miss on a first watch. A buyer somewhere signs the paperwork on a brand new truck, trusting that the reliability badge on the window sticker means what it looks like it means. A completely different engineering team working on a completely different problem in a completely different state trusts that a torque spec written into an assembly manual will actually get followed on the line every single time, shift after shift, year after year. Neither one of them checked closely enough, and depending on which truck you're standing in front of tonight, you might be living inside either one of those two stories without ever having been told which, or even having a way to find out until something finally goes wrong.